Welcome back to the Relationships Made Simple for Men podcast with me, Bryce Bauer. Today, I'm joined by my beautiful wife, Jenny Morrow. She wanted to interview me because she's starting her own podcast. So today, we're just going to jump into that.
Cool. Well, welcome, Bryce.
Hey, it's good to be here, Jen.
Yeah, I'm super excited to be here with you today. I'm moving my eyes kind of from the camera, but also coming down to you because I'd like to see your face as you're sharing about your experience. So, for those who are watching this on video, you'll kind of see my eyes moving, and that's just because I do want to be able to watch Bryce as he's sharing his story. I'm curious, Bryce. Well, first of all, tell us a little bit about your work in the field of personal and relationship development. What do you do? How long have you been doing it? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I think in some ways my journey really started when I was 18 and I was a client at a wilderness therapy program in North Carolina. And I went there for my issues with drugs and alcohol and also mental health. I was in a really rough spot. And I didn't like attending that program. It was really hard to be camping in the woods for 60 days. But when I came out of that program, it really lit a fire under me because I wanted to come back and work at a program like that. I wanted to help people. I thought it was like a cool job. You could just go camping for half your life. And a lot of the staff seemed pretty transient and lived adventurous lives. I think that's what really got me interested in this field in the first place was having gone through a personal development process as a client. So I began researching programs, and after a few years, I found a program in Utah that was doing interviews, like week-long backpacking interviews to work at the program. So that's what got me out to Utah. And then since then, I worked for 5 different therapeutic programs before I met you, Jenny. You being a marriage and family therapist, us doing some of our own work as clients, getting support for our relationship. That got me more interested in specifically relational development. And so as you know, I've done multiple trainings since then, mostly by licensed therapists. And I currently run an online men's group. I've been doing a yearly men's retreat the last 5 years. So the next one is next month. We work with couples together, and then I also see clients individually on my own. And most of my clients are men, I think probably because I'm a man and there aren't as many men in this space. So it just kind of naturally turned out that way that you maybe work with more women and I work with more men, but then we also work with couples together. So that's what I do full time. And I also play pickleball full time, as you know. And we spend a lot of time together going out, walking, hanging out with friends and family. So I would say, yeah, that sums up my life in a lot of ways.
Thanks, Bryce. I had a couple questions pop up while you were sharing. One is I was curious when you said that going into the program you went into, well, you've talked about how it was an adult program, not a adolescent program, which kind of makes a difference because in the world of like inpatient treatment programs, you can be voluntarily there if you're an adult, or you can be required to be there if you're an adolescent, like you don't have a choice. So in your circumstance, you were in an adult program over 18, and technically it was voluntary in the sense that technically you could leave if you chose to. Is that right?
Yeah, that is a good distinction and something that a lot of people don't understand about adolescent programs is a lot of kids are there involuntarily. I mean, they might actually want to be there, but they also don't have a choice. So that changes the dynamic of the clientele in the program. So I was 18, I was barely an adult, but I could have said no. The consequence was that even though I had moved out and was in college, the consequence was that everyone in my life was saying I needed to go. My parents were saying they weren't going to support me on any level if I didn't go. So that was the intervention that I went through.
Great, thanks. I was also curious, you talked about you said going into it, there was the issues you were having with drugs and alcohol, the addiction aspect of what was happening, and then you also mentioned the mental health aspect. Do you feel comfortable sharing any more about the mental health aspect and what that meant? what you were navigating at that time?
Yeah, definitely. I think people who ask me usually feel more anxious than I do when this topic comes up because I've shared about this so many times in programs and in AA and yeah, just I'm really open to sharing my story. So I moved to Arkansas. My family moved to Arkansas when I was 11, almost 12, and it was really rough for me. So within a few months, I went into a pretty deep, dark depression. Back then I wasn't really able, I didn't have a cell phone. I wasn't able to communicate with my friends back in Michigan. My dog had run away. My dad had a new job and was out working quite a bit. So I just didn't have a lot of support. I was also starting to go through puberty. And so I really collapsed into my own mind and remember starting to feel like maybe I just don't want to live anymore. And even though I didn't have a plan, there was a lot of suicidal ideation that came in. And in a weird way, I think what helped me was like connecting with other kids that were more troubled. So in seventh, eighth grade, I started making friends that came from rougher households, single parent families, who were getting in a lot of trouble in school, and I felt like I could kind of be myself, like I could show my darker side, and laugh and joke with these kids, and I think just by watching them, I learned that like in some ways you can get social credit by being a bad boy, and so I really took that path. And in some ways, I can see how it might have saved my life had I kept collapsing and isolating. I don't know what would have happened, but instead I kind of exploded and was like, I'm just going to do whatever the fuck I want in my life. And so that led to me trying drugs and alcohol at an early age. And then
How
I,
old?
huh?
How old when you say an early age?
So 14 is when I first tried alcohol and marijuana and Adderall. All my friends had prescriptions to Adderall. And then I also had sex for the first time at 14. So I think at that point I was really willing to try whatever. I mean, sometimes we'd huff gasoline or Freon out of the air conditioners at our homes. I mean, we would just learn ways to get high and change our state. So there was that. And then it was probably around 16 when I first tried cocaine, even though I never really used that very much, but if it came around, I would try it. Ecstasy, I tried LSD and mushrooms again, just a handful of times. But I think part of me was nervous to try certain things, but as time went on, I got more and more like open to the idea of just trying whatever. So I do think addiction kicked in relatively early with me. Like I got really drunk the first time I ever drank, threw up in the bed, peed the bed, and slept in it. And instead of waking up and going, that was a huge mistake, I'll never do that again, I was like, no, I still want to have that feeling because it was so freeing to just feel the anxiety dissolve that the next night I went into it realizing that if I can just not get that drunk that quickly, I can enjoy that experience for longer. And so the way that my brain started to work it out was like, no, I really want this. I even think I need this in my life. I just have to find a way to get access to it more consistently and then control it. And I think that's more the way that an addict's brain works versus someone like yourself who tries alcohol and is like, I don't really like this state change or feeling a bit dizzy. So I'm just not going to do that. And I don't know what the difference is there. Maybe some of it is personality, but yeah, it kicked off almost immediately where I was like, I want to do this as much as possible. And I did. Yeah, I drank almost every weekend, I would say, through high school. There might have been periods where, I mean, I got a DUI when I was 16, so I maybe cut back then. There was a period of time where I smoked weed every day for probably 2 years. It was really easy to get and easy to conceal. So, yeah, but it was just a shit show through high school.
I'm kind of curious now, having the background you have with your own treatment process, and then also the continued personal development, relationship development work you've done, and even getting into the field of helping other people. What's it like for you right now in this present moment as you reflect back on that story and as you're speaking it?
It's a good question, and you ask me this a lot when I'll stumble upon a memory and I'll share it with you, and you're like, how does it feel in this moment to to talk about it, and it's mixed. There's a sadness if I really drop into what I was going through as a young person and understanding that even though at times I was having fun and feeling excited, that I was really dealing with pain, and just desperate to get out of my state. There's also like I feel proud that I have done that. Like I haven't used drugs and alcohol for 18 years now, and I feel really proud of that. I think it allows me to have the life that I live today, and I've repaired the relationships with my parents, which was really damaged. And then curious, I think there's still more that I'm exploring about that. And it's not like I've completely let go of all those behaviors, or all that pain. There's still parts of it that I'm dealing with today that I'm still trying to figure out. So, but yeah, I feel mostly excited about that journey now. I feel confident in my journey most of the time.
Yeah. Yeah, I felt my eyes watering a little bit as you were sharing that. And I felt there was another thing I was curious about as you were sharing. I may not remember. It was when you first shared something about the sadness. Well, what I'm hearing now is that there's a mix of sadness and also excitement. Oh, this is what I was curious about. One of the things that struck me as you were sharing was when you talked about that first time using and getting really drunk and feeling free of the anxiety and being
Mhm.
like, I want to feel that again. And that just like really stood out to me for some reason. Just imagining that experience of feeling so locked into like an anxious state, or like you
Mhm.
said, just feeling so locked into a state and just wanting, just experiencing the contrast of the freedom from that state.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And it just helped, I just felt like a lot of compassion because our backgrounds are so different. So I don't have the experience of using drugs and alcohol, or even feeling like I was so anxious that I needed to get out of my state. Like I don't have that same experience. And I think sometimes it's easy from the background I come from, or from anyone's background where you don't have that certain type of experience to not understand why someone is so drawn to using. And I just feel a lot of compassion as you're talking about it.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. And I do see it as, we I forgot who said it, all problems are relational problems. And I even think addiction is that. Like I didn't really feel that safe in my closest relationships with my parents or with my sister, with my friends. Not that I think I had a good childhood, from the outside looking in, but for some reason I really didn't trust that people were there for me. And so I emotionally, at least, I think physically I knew they were. So I think, really collapsing into myself, it might be why I have a more avoidant attachment style. And I think when I see people using, I'm like, yeah, their current state, their sober state is so miserable that they will do anything to change it. And of course, there can be a physical dependence that gets layered on top of that. But the initial reasons why people use, I think, are because they have trouble making secure attachments with the people in their lives. And so even when people get sober, a lot of times they really struggle in relationships. I saw this with people in Alcoholics Anonymous. It was, yeah, you still have to do more work once you get sober to learn how to trust people again and to trust yourself, and to manage your feelings, which is really hard to do. And like you, I think growing up in a like the maybe more of a sheltered environment, but that was also very safe in a lot of ways emotionally. I just think there's pros and cons to those different experiences. There's not one that's better than the other.
Hmm. What do you feel like was a pro to the experience that you had?
Oh, I think that I don't judge people for how they are. I think that I mean, I've done a lot of things that I regret, and I've been around people who have done things that I'm sure they regret. And so whenever I see poor behavior or people acting out, there's a sense that I know where that's coming from. I think most people really are good, and that we're really dealing with a sick brain and not like a flawed human fundamentally. So I think as far like if people, it happens all the time in sessions, people will share that they did something or they regret something and they feel really ashamed about it. And I'm like, I can just hold that and not get too triggered by it. And I think that helps me do my work because there's a lot of things that people do and think and feel that others don't see. And I see and hear about that all the time. And I think it allows me, it doesn't really bother me. Yeah, it doesn't bother me. So I think I have a lot of capacity to just hear people's truth.
I love that as you're saying that. And I mean, I even feel that in our relationship where I feel like there's a lot of trust I have in you that I can share things about my experience or my world. And you really are one of the least judgmental people that I know, where there's like a lot of space to hear things that, yeah, I'd maybe be scared for other people to know or see about me. And I just feel like there's a lot of, you have a lot of space to hold, I think maybe like chaos in some ways. And not that you're choosing a life where you're going down those roads in unhealthy ways anymore, but you've chosen a profession where you get to like hold space for those experiences
Yeah. Yeah.
and help people. There was something else coming up around relationships that stood out. That was really interesting to me when you talked about the idea. You mentioned all problems being relationship problems, and that actually comes from Alfred Adler, who is the founder of individual psychology, and he said something like that, like all problems at their core are interpersonal relationship problems. So it's interesting to hear you even relate that back to addiction as well. I found it interesting when you talked about like not feeling safe in your closest relationships and maybe how that was impacting your experience of your own state of consciousness. Is there anything else about that that you feel comfortable sharing in terms of like what was it that was going on that left you feeling that lack of safety? Or do you have any sense of that, like where that struggle was coming from?
Yeah, I think it was more the invisible stuff. Like our parents' generation didn't know anything about human psychology or relational development in the way that we understand it today. So I think my dad, in a lot of ways, had a tough childhood, big family, and was pretty afraid of his older brothers and his dad. There was violence in the home. And so even though I didn't even get spanked as a kid, I think that my dad knew how to go and do fun things and work. But as far as like really dropping in and getting to know the sensitive boy that I was, that didn't happen as much. And so I think even at an early age, I kind of learned how to take care of myself emotionally. And I would hear this from my parents like, oh, yeah, you could just go be by yourself and do self play or go explore in the woods. And I'd go out in the woods by myself for hours. And there's nothing really that unusual about it to me. But now looking back, I'm like, oh, yeah, I didn't go to my parents for emotional support. And I think my mom had some difficult things happen when I was really young. Her dad passed away unexpectedly. She has dealt with depression, even though I think she functions at a pretty high level and even did back then taking care of me and my younger sister. But I don't get the sense that there was anyone there that knew how to really connect with me emotionally. So, to answer your question, I think that's what had me feel more isolated in a lot of ways. And then when the pain grew, and my parents did try to help, but I think as the pain grew, I looked to myself to figure out how to deal with that. Yeah, I did it in the way that the best way I knew how at the time, which was to find substances and find experiences and do crazy things that would get me out of that anxiety, like, move my focus away from the pain.
Thanks for sharing that. So I'm kind of curious, after you went to treatment, you got home, you said you've been sober 18 years, so you've been sober since treatment. And like what kind of kept you in the personal development field at that point? Like what did things look like moving forward from there?
Really, it was just the dream. I didn't have much going for me. I was from a smaller town in Arkansas, and I came back. I went to North Carolina for the program, and I came back to Bentonville, which now has grown a lot. But back when I was there, there wasn't a whole lot going on. So I went back to my old friendships, and people didn't really know how to relate with me. I had just been through this transformational, intense experience. doing therapy multiple times a day in group settings and one-to-one, and learning about why I am the way that I am. And then I came back into my friend group and no one understood me, knew how to relate with me. So I think people kind of avoided me. They were just doing their own thing. So I was working at a restaurant because I wanted a job. I wanted to be self-supporting. I moved back in with my parents, but the whole plan was to get the hell out of Arkansas. Like I just knew that there wasn't anything there for me. And I did have big dreams and aspirations of moving out west or California, to be in the mountains or on the beach or maybe Hawaii. And so that was the plan all along. And my ticket to get out of Arkansas, the only thing that I thought that I could do was maybe work at one of these programs because I kind of understood how it worked. I didn't have a degree. I didn't have any skills really in anything. So that was what I hung my hat on for the 2.5 years when I got back home and waiting for my 21st birthday, because usually you have to be 21 to work for these programs. And I went to a lot of AA meetings. I went to probably 250 meetings in those 2.5 years, maybe 300, and got a sponsor, worked the steps, and even started doing a coach training program because I wanted something to put on my resume to be able to work in one of these programs. But I was all in on being a wilderness guide. So that's what really kept me afloat in those 2.5 years when I thought about relapsing. And there were plenty of opportunities to do it. But I was like, if I do that, then I can't get out of here. So I need to stick with it.
You said that was also around the same time you went through your first coach training. What was it like to go through your first coach training? Because that's what you do now professionally. What was that first? Because that would have been what, close to 18 years ago?
Yeah, I was 19 when I did my first coach training, and I had heard about this program. It was called the Coaches Training Institute at the time, and still one of the biggest coach organizations in the world. I think they have 50,000 plus coaches, but they would do only in-person trainings at the time. This is in like 2008, 2009, and I found some in Chicago. So I saved up money, and my parents helped me pay for the coach training because I just didn't have the funds to do that. But all the travel and everything, I took care of. And so I drove up to Chicago. It was about 9 hours from Arkansas, and did 3 separate 3-day trainings up there. And then I wanted to go out west. So I did my last 2 weekends in San Francisco and drove from Arkansas to California. And I mean, this is like a longer story. Like I didn't even have a place to stay when I showed up in California, and I ended up staying in someone's foreclosed home. This is 2008 or 9 when the housing market crashed. So I met this woman, and she said I could stay in her home that had nothing in it. She just gave me like a blow up mattress and no furniture. It was kind of crazy. But I spent almost 2 months in the Bay Area because I thought, hey, I'm already out here. Let me try to find a job and work and live in California, and I'll wait till this next coach training. But as far as the coach training was concerned, it was awesome. I loved it. Like I probably felt like I was going to be a great coach because I was just so excited about it. I thought, I can do this already. And I was by far the youngest person there. I mean, like I'm a 19-year-old doing this coach training, and I'm around a bunch of people in their 40s, 50s, 60s who have like had careers in that they were lawyers or real estate agents that were looking for like something new in their life. And so I totally stuck out, but everyone really accepted me, and I think they loved me and wanted to help me and support me learn how to be a coach. So all around, it was a really great experience, and I learned a lot. Yeah, I mean, there's still some tools today that I use, and yeah, I'm glad I did it. I mean, looking back, I can see how much I didn't know. Like I just didn't. There's a certain level of life experience I didn't have to where I think it's helpful to have that going into the coaching space. But yeah, I've always been all in on that journey. I always wanted to work in this space. I probably will for the rest of my life. And it's the only thing I'm like really, really good at, I think. Just
And you are. I've watched a lot of therapists and coaches work over the years, having been in this field for 20 years. And it's really fun to work with you in tandem, like in our couple sessions or when we're running retreats or doing a workshop, just to trust you so much. I went through a lot of training and also was similar to you where I just felt so passionate about it. When I started my marriage and family therapy degree, I was like, this is amazing that I get to sit in these rooms and study this stuff. And it was just, it felt like the perfect fit for me. And so being able to do that in tandem with someone else who's so passionate about this work is like it's very enlivening. And so, yeah, I think this is an area where you're really gifted. And it's cool to see how you take like your giftedness and then you keep learning. You've continued to expand by learning new ways of thinking about things, by continually getting trained. And it's been really, really cool to see that and see your own development through something you're actually just really naturally good at. So I'm kind of curious. So there was this phase where you went through this coach training. It felt really good. If you felt like you were good at it, and you also still had this desire to go into wilderness therapy. So I feel curious to go to that now, hear a little bit more about the wilderness therapy experience, your experience as a guide. I know you'd done the coach training prior to becoming a guide. Is that correct?
yeah, I did 5 separate 3-day trainings prior to working for the therapy programs.
Okay, cool. So yeah, I'd love to hear a little bit more about working for the therapy programs, what that was like. I don't know if you were able to bring some of that coaching experience that you had in those few trainings into that. Um, but either way, I would just love to hear more about the experience of being a wilderness guide.
Yeah, so I worked for multiple programs in different capacities. So each one was kind of different.
And they were all adult programs, correct?
Yeah, they were all adult. Most of them were all male programs too, ages 18 to 30.
Mm.
Some were co-ed. So I loved it immediately. I moved to Utah. I was commuting 3 hours from Salt Lake City to this tiny little town in Wayne County with 200 people. And I was actually working at the residential center because they didn't have any openings for the wilderness guide positions. But I actually liked the residential center a lot more. So it was where clients would go before they went out into the wilderness and after they came back and they were about to transition back home or into sober living or whatever. So for the most part, I got to sleep in a bed most nights. But I loved it. I was hanging out with people that were around my age, the clients. I was actually a lot of times younger than most of the clients, but I was in this capacity of like more of a mentor. And I had great bosses and supervisors and therapists that I was really excited to learn from. So, and they gave me the reins pretty early. I mean, within the first month or something, they were like, do you want to run like some of these night groups? And we had this format. And I was like, yeah, for sure, I'll do it. And then I always wanted to do that. Like if we were ever running a group, I was like, I wanted to do it. And I'd get feedback from the therapist if they were there on like what I could do better. And we do trainings every week when people are coming on and off shift. I worked a week on and a week off typically. And I loved it. Unfortunately, that program was bought and closed after a year and a half of working there. And then they opened up a private program that I came back and worked at. But I really loved working in that space. It was kind of like we were hanging out and trying to either do something that was really fun and engaging, like hiking, sports, or we were doing these like deeply personal groups. And I loved both of those things. So I wouldn't say I loved every minute of every program, but for the most part, I knew I was in the right place. I loved working for these programs. I mean, when I actually did work out in the field as a wilderness guide, that was probably the most challenging type of work that I did because the weather is just wild. I mean, if you're in the high desert in the winter, it can be extremely cold and dry and it's just hard. It's just hard being out there. And then when you're in the summer, when you're up in the mountains, there's a lot of bugs and it can be hot and humid and you're always sleeping outside. I actually got to the point where I could sleep better outside than I would inside, but naturally, I think that was always more of a challenge to me, to always be dirty, always be sweaty, smelly. And yeah, just have to manage food and going to the bathroom, all those things outside. I've told you many stories of just like something will be brought back. Oh, I remember when it rained for 3 days straight, flash flooding, and everyone was in their tents and water was seeping in. And we were just like, sitting around this tiny little fire underneath this little tarp, and, just everyone was miserable, and I'm glad I had those experiences, but I'm much more of a fair weather camper now. I don't go backpacking that much, and I'd rather sleep in a bed inside now.
I love that. That's so funny. Oh, that's so funny. So yeah, it sounds really intense. I can't even imagine that experience. And yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Well, yeah, the environment can be intense, and then also the clientele. A lot of times, wilderness therapy is used when people have been through multiple residential programs and really struggled or left AMA against medical advice. Or it's for just really tough clients that if there's an educational consultant working with the family, they might suggest wilderness programs because they're a lot harder to leave. I mean, almost every week we'd have a client that was like, I want to leave. I don't want to be here. Maybe they get really aggressive. And, if we're in the middle of the woods or in the desert, it's like, okay, well, we can delay them by telling them that we can start walking, and one of us might just start walking with them in some direction. And that was the way to kind of diffuse and de-escalate the situation sometimes. So there was a lot of conflict. You had to be really thick-skinned and yeah, deal with some really difficult personalities working in that field, as you can imagine, with 18 to 30-year-old men that some have been to jail, have been shooting heroin for years, and they are not having it.
Mm. Yeah, and I'm just reflecting back on even you sharing your own experience of that in wilderness therapy when you were a client and wanting to leave, and just how much harder it was to leave that versus if you had been in an inpatient situation.
Yeah,
Or sorry, an inpatient residential place that was more
right.
traditional in a city or something.
Oh yeah, I would have left for sure. And there's this whole world that a lot of people don't have never been in, right? So even when I wanted to leave, they told me, well, you can't take any of your gear with you because that's ours. And there's a dirt road 9 miles from here, and then that'll bring you to a paved road. That's what they told me when I said I'm done, I want to leave. And just being faced with that reality is a young person, where it's like, I can walk out of here in I can try to walk out of here in sandals and like maybe hitchhike back to Arkansas with no money. It was terrifying, but it was also confronting in a really good way. Like, hey, I have made choices to be where I am here today, and I've been really entitled around hoping that parents or somebody will bail me out, or I can just avoid consequences. And here I am, faced with all the consequences of what got me here today, and I can stay and still receive help, and people are willing to help me process that, or I can go off on my own, and it's my life's gonna get really hard really quick. So I think there were life-saving moments in that program, and that was one of them for sure.
Hmm. Yeah, I can tell you being my husband and my partner and the love of my life. I'm like just so, so grateful. I feel really grateful for that program and grateful that, yeah, you were able to get sober at such a young age and
Yeah.
feel some emotion as I say that. There was something else coming up, another question I had. Oh, so you mentioned earlier in the interview this idea that, there can be certain behaviors or mindsets. You didn't use the word mindset. You said behaviors or something, ways of being or something where even though you've been sober from drugs and alcohol since 18, there can be certain actions or mindsets or thought ways of thinking that can just stick with us.
Yeah.
And so when you were a wilderness guide, were there any experiences you had that kind of reflected back to you areas where you were still struggling yourself?
Let's see. Well, I did notice this was hard for me to differentiate, especially early on, from the clients, because sometimes they'd come in and they just wanted to goof around and tell war stories, like make jokes about how they'd behaved in the past. And initially, like I thought that was funny and I wanted to join in on that. And I would continually get feedback that this is not healthy for their recovery. And it wasn't healthy for my recovery either. So I think being able to take an honest look at the behaviors and what caused them and not make light of things that either hurt me or hurt others. That was one thing I noticed right away working for the programs. And then let's see if there's anything else. I mean, yeah, there were times when we'd have to stick with a plan, a structure for the day. And I didn't always want to do it. I wanted to blow off a group because I was tired or, I was distracted. My mind was somewhere else. And to have the discipline to be like, hey, no, we're going to sit down and do this. I know everyone's like not wanting to do it right now, but to hold the line and say, no, we're going to sit down and talk at 7 o'clock. And we're going to start with a meditation. And then we're going to talk about how we're really feeling, even when I didn't want to. That really brought me out of my shell as well when I wanted to like just go be alone and cope on my own somehow. So those are a couple ways that I was challenged initially with working for these programs. And I could see my old patterns kind of creep in, just wanting to avoid things.
That's interesting to hear about. Like what popped up for me as you were saying that is it almost sounds like continuing to be in the field and stay in this work also helped you in some ways with your own process.
Totally. I mean, I've said this. I think that's why I'm in this field. Like it helps me. I get so much from it. I worry sometimes that if I were doing something else, that maybe some of those older behaviors would creep in. I mean, I think they would. So the fact that I'm constantly having to look in the mirror when someone's bringing an issue to me and work on myself so that I can tell people like, well, here's what I do. Here's what's worked for me. Here's how I'm dealing with that today. Yeah, I think it just keeps this huge mirror right in front of me and it helps me grow and learn and look at myself.
That's really cool. So after that experience of wilderness therapy, what happened from there in terms of your work in the field?
Do you mean like when we met?
Well, it could be. So you did initially you talked about the wilderness therapy. Well, I guess anything else you want to talk about in terms of just the treatment programs you worked for, anything else outside of the wilderness therapy program? I know you were down in New Mexico for a while, you were in Hawaii. Is there anything else you want to mention about those experiences?
Sure. Yeah. So I worked for a program in Utah. Then I moved to Taos, New Mexico for a little bit. I didn't really like that. Lived out of my truck, managing a sober living, and came back to Utah. Tried to go to school, formal school, and that wasn't really working. Worked for wilderness program, another residential program, and then I got a job out in Hawaii working for a wilderness program on the Big Island. That was more of a horticultural therapy program where there was a lot of gardening. We didn't ever camp. But we spent the whole day outside, and that was really cool. I had always wanted to move to Hawaii, live in Hawaii, and that was a great year of my life. I don't think I wanted to stay any longer than that, but I'm so glad that I went out there, met a lot of cool people, and I mean, Hawaii's just awesome. It still has a place in my heart. I went back last year to visit a friend, and I'm like, this place is just awesome. I can't live here because it's so far away, and that's just not the way that we want to set up our life, but it's a magical place. And then I suppose an interesting part of my story, there was this intermediate, there was this gap between me working for programs and then coming back to Utah when I met you, where I traveled around the world, completely around the globe. So I got a work visa to work in Australia for an outdoor education company. My friend hooked me up with a really good job. It was a company that worked with the school system. So I went out there, bought a car, got a bank account, had a job, and was even planning on maybe staying there long term. But I just had to find a girlfriend because that's what my friend had done. And I thought that maybe I could do that. So it's kind of a fantasy. I never found a girlfriend, so after 6 months, I was like, better get out of here. And I was getting lonely too. I'd been away from friends and family for a long time at that point, and traveled through Southeast Asia and Europe, and even down into Africa, Morocco, and then came back to the States with a bag of dirty clothes and a net worth of $0, and was like, okay, now what am I gonna do? And then I mean that, and then I met you a few months after that on a dating app, and I wasn't really concerned about not having anything to provide financially at that point. I was 26. But it was cool to look back on that and realize that there's no way that you were dating me because of anything that I had. It really was just for who I was at that point. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of where our journey starts. And where more of my relational development journey starts. A lot of what I did prior to that was focused on just me as me. And then I think being in relationship with you and progressing in our commitment, that's when it felt like a much different journey than I had been on up to that point.
So tell me, up to that point, well, moving forward from there, since that was about the time we met, how would you say your own personal development, your own individual work, and then your work that you did in the field, how did that impact like when you met me and our dating process? So yeah, talk a little bit about how we met and also how your work and your own personal development started impacting like how you chose me. Just how was it impacting your relationships at that time, especially your
I
relationship?
was working in the therapy field, impacting my.
Yeah, or having worked in the therapy field or having gone through coach training or having done your own therapy. How was all of that, your personal development for you as well as how you were working in it? How was that impacting how you were making decisions about dating, and how it went with us?
Yeah, good question. So, one thing I realized after my last breakup before I moved to Hawaii was that I would compartmentalize a lot of my personal work to when I was at work. So, I dated a couple of women in my early 20s that really struggled with their mental health. And I didn't really feel like I knew how to help them. And I couldn't talk about some of the things I was learning in the therapy programs because they just didn't really understand it or didn't have much interest in it. So I think what I realized when I came back from traveling was that I wanted to meet someone who I could have these deeper conversations with, who was doing some form of personal development, who was also sober. That had been an issue in past relationships with girlfriends drinking alcohol. And so yeah, that really did inform who I was looking for. And so when I met you, I was like, oh great, therapist, doesn't drink, seems really stable in their life. Like you check the boxes of the upgrade that I was looking for my past relationships.
So it's kind of cool because I'm just reflecting on my choice as well through our process. And like you were saying, how you didn't have anything when you came back from your world travels, you didn't have anything in your bank account, you had a bag of dirty clothes. And you said, so I knew that Jen wasn't dating me for what I had because I didn't have much at that point. And it is interesting to reflect back as you're sharing on my own journey of what I had experienced as well, where I had dated men who had certain things, whether it was certain careers, certain amounts in their bank account, but I hadn't found someone that I felt like could really emotionally attune and could do more of that personal development work with me as well. And so I'm just remembering our first date. And I could talk about my experience of it, but I'm kind of curious to hear like what was your experience of our first date and the connections there for you?
Well, how about you go ahead because I know I've heard this story before, but you can tell me first.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm just remembering how we met up for coffee on our first date. We had met on Tinder, which it was one of the only dating apps at the time. I think it might have been the only one that I knew about. So prior to that, I had tried eHarmony and Match a little bit, and I was 35 at the time. Bryce was 26. And so when I was swiping, you can see the details. I can see your age, a few pictures, things like that. I did think that the apps were like amazing because after having been on other platforms where I didn't have any control over who could talk to me and communicate with me, it could be very overwhelming. So it was when we matched and we both had to say a yes to that. Right away, Bryce reached out and said, hey, do you want to get together for coffee? And it was perfect because there were so many matches I would make where the guys would just kind of check in randomly, almost like we were text friends. And I'd hang in on that for 2 to 3 texts, maybe 4, and then I'd say like, "Hey, it'd be great to meet up." And if they didn't say anything back or they just kept texting, I would block them. So I was really interested in actually meeting someone and actually finding a partnership. And so it was great with Bryce because pretty quickly you initiated engaging and getting together in person. So we met for our first date at a coffee shop, and I don't remember if I knew that you were in the therapy field yet. you were working at an inpatient treatment center in Salt Lake at the time and helping manage a sober house. And I just remember it was really nice to, yeah, feel like I could talk to someone who understood some of those types of experiences of helping people. And then also, it was during that date that you mentioned you had gone to Byron Katie's 9-day program with your dad after you'd gotten sober. So, um, and at this point, you'd been sober about 8 years or so. So, but earlier on, I think early in your 20s, you went to the Byron Katie program, or maybe when you were 19 even?
Yeah, I also went to that when I was 19 or 20.
19 or 20. Okay. And I just remember feeling so happy because I literally, prior to dating you, there were two men I dated prior to dating you for a block of time. And with one of them, I remember thinking, I feel like I need to find someone who understands Byron Katie's work. I literally had that thought. Like someone who knows how to question their thinking and do turnarounds and has like tools and techniques for how to recognize projections and how to stop their projection and turn it around. And when you said you'd been to Byron Katie's 9-day program, it just like felt, I was like, oh my gosh, here's someone who understands that. And I didn't know yet if we were even going to go on a second date. We had kind of an age difference, and I wasn't sure what you were going to think of me or what I was, it was just still very new. But I remember that was definitely an early connector for me.
Yeah, yeah. Got you with the Byron Katie.
You did. You did.
And people who don't know who that is will have no idea what we're talking about. But basically, it's like an author, an older woman. She's quite a bit older now, and I went to her nine day school, she calls it, where we spent 9 days working with our judgments and how to examine them, turn them around to look in the mirror. So it's a pretty effective tool that
Mhm.
I still use today.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And I actually think her questions and her process was probably what helped me get out of the Mormon church. And I used her process twice in two big moments where I really felt myself being able to differentiate from the Mormon church and then actually leave it. And so, yeah, someone who knew how to do that, it felt like a big deal to me that you had some education in that. So, okay, so from there, we meet, we start dating. Yeah, go and talk a little bit about that experience and what was going on with your work at the time, and again, how that was influencing your experience of dating and relationships.
Well, I think we, just like a lot of couples, went through a really nice honeymoon phase. I was attracted to you and interested in you from the beginning. And I think we hung out every other day for maybe 3, 4 weeks before I asked you to be my girlfriend and to be exclusive, even though I was already not dating anyone else after our first date because I thought it was just better to stick with one person at a time. Yeah, so we became a couple and even got invited because I often wouldn't go home for Christmas. I didn't like traveling during the holidays. So your family invited me over, you invited me to Christmas, and they got me presents, and I just was around this wholesome, nice, kind, welcoming Mormon family, and I was like, "Oh, this is cool. I like these people." Even though I had reservations about them judging me down the road, which really hasn't happened, which is awesome. Your family's really, really great. But yeah, I think we had a nice honeymoon phase. And then we hit some bumps in the road around our differences and how we thought about porn use because I had watched porn off and on since I was young, and you were concerned about that. I initially didn't even really want to acknowledge it or look into it. I was honest about watching it, but I didn't want to take that out of my life. And I mean, looking back, I think, there was something there to be explored. And we got in, you suggested seeing a couples counselor, and I made the decision to stop watching porn because I felt like it made more sense to me that I didn't have a good reason to keep watching it, even though it wasn't like an addiction. But I think it opened up new levels of depth into looking at how I manage myself on my own. And but yeah, that was like the first big conflict that we had in relationship, when we got support for it. And I don't know. I mean, there's a lot more to the story. We've been together for about 10 years, but yeah, I think 6 months of honeymoon and then some struggle, and then we got some support, and then I think we've had, in a lot of ways, multiple honeymoon phases in our relationship with also some major hurdles.
How would you say, having worked in the field of therapy and personal development, how did that impact your willingness and openness to get support so early on in our relationship, 6 months into dating? Did it feel like that had an impact at all, having been in the field or having done therapy before? I am curious because I had in previous relationships, I had said we'd hit spots where I said, I think whatever we're going through is bigger than what either of us have resource or capacity for, and I want to get support. And in both those relationships, they were a no to that, which is ultimately what ended the dating relationship. And with you, 6 months in, when I said, yeah, I want to get help and a third party to talk this one through, you were very open to it.
Yeah, I knew that my parents had gone to therapy when I was younger, some. I had gone to therapy a handful of times as a teenager. And then going through that therapy program at 18, I learned pretty early how to talk about just my problems. Be like, yeah, I had a problem. And then I went and got help for it. And that's what happened. So I never had a stigma around getting support or going to therapy. I did see it a lot like getting coached in any other thing like a sport. So I'm still sometimes surprised that people feel afraid or they feel a stigma around getting support for emotional things because I'm like, well, what do you do if you don't do that? Like, do you just keep struggling with the same thing? You don't go ask people for advice about it. So when me to go in and get some support from somebody, no, I didn't feel any resistance to it. I was like, yeah, seems like a good idea. Why not do that? And I've had mostly positive experiences in that place. So no, I didn't. I was good. I was good with going. I was glad we were going. I even felt progress after, we were doing sessions. So it was all good in my opinion.
Yeah, cool. That's awesome. So moving forward from there, we first meet, we have 6 months of dating. You're still working in the field of treatment. Anything else you want to talk about just from there in terms of like your own development and also your career development?
Well, as you know, we hit another little snag when you wanted to watch a recording of this couple who were both marriage and family therapists, and they were talking about adult attachment. And I still don't know why. I mean, I have some clues as to why, but I was resistant to that. I just kept kind of dragging my feet about agreeing to watch it, or, oh, I can't sit that long and watch. Maybe it was like 3 hours or something.
I think it was an hour and a half, but
It felt like 3 hours to me. But anyways, yeah, I had some resistance to that. And looking back, I don't know what it was. Maybe it was fear about learning more about relationships, just like what that could mean for the level of responsibility that it would put on me. I was still, even though I had done personal development, I was still very individually focused in my life. And I kind of wanted a relationship where that could be the case. So, like, if there were hard things, I was kind of like, well, let's go work on things separately and then come back together and they'll be good. That was one fundamental idea that I had to break down in our relationship. Anyways, long story short, I do agree. You stay with it. I agree to watch this video. I find it interesting, even though the videography was terrible, which I kept commenting on. And which led me to go to a weekend workshop with you in Colorado, which led me to sign up for the Deep Psychology of Intimate Relationships 9-month course, along with the relationship coach training by this couple. And that really set my career on a path to working with individuals and couples because I was learning things that, even though there were similarities and overlap, I had never really learned how to work things out with people in a romantic context, especially.
Mhm.
So it's kind of like I knew how to manage clients. I knew how to have decent boundaries with my parents. I knew how to do my own thing and like go work on myself, but staying with conversations, staying in conflict with you and learning how to validate and have compassion and have patience for that felt like a whole new skill set that I didn't have. And I learned a lot about that and still am learning a lot about that.
In this moment, as you're reflecting back on that experience and starting to learn about more of the relational work with another person, are there any particular moments that stand out in that journey of learning that, whether it was yourself in those courses or with me, is there anything that, any memories that pop up that are memorable? In,
Well, this sounds funny, but when we went to that workshop, one of the first skills that we practiced where Jason told us to turn to our partner and just practice reflective listening. Even though I had heard that before, I had never practiced it directly. And I remember thinking like, this is really cool. This is like, I'm surprised at how simple this is and how well it works. And it just kind of blew my mind. I was like, how could something so simple blow my mind? And then I started using it with you. And at that time, I think I was just starting my coaching practice. So I started using it more with my clients and then just random people in my life. And I was surprised at how it changed the conversation. It wasn't like I was always having to think about what to say. Like I could really just stay with someone to and try to understand them and help them feel more understood. So that changed the way that I communicated day one. There was also oh yeah, we had something come up. I don't remember when this was, but it was before we got married, I'm pretty sure, but we were driving to your sister's house and I was like bringing up an idea of going on a trip, like a backpacking trip, and you weren't really feeling it. I wanted to go to Southern Utah and you were like, well, maybe we could get an Airbnb or something. And then I was like, well, you know what? How about I'll just go by myself backpacking and you can do whatever you want to do. And you were really hurt by that. And we had a really it was just a really hard moment where you even wanted me to stop the car and you need to get out and just take a few breaths. And I did not handle that well at all. But I think I was just so stuck in that framework of, well, if we can't figure it out, I'll do me, you do you, happy, happy equals happy. And I was so confused why it wasn't working. I was like, no, you can do whatever you want, Jen. I'm not even telling you what you need to do. I'm just saying I'm going to do. And I think that really, it was just really confronting to see how my way wasn't working for you and that I would have to try a different way. And this idea of, again, I think staying regulated and taking in the information, your wants and needs, listening and validating those and staying in the creative solution process was something I hadn't really had to do before. And doing those trainings helped me learn how to do that much, much better.
that's awesome. Yeah, I felt like when you started going through that personal development process and learning the things you were learning through the deep psychology of intimate relationships and through that first coach training for relationships specifically, I felt like, yeah, it was just cool to see how it was impacting us. And I remember when you brought up the idea of doing that training to get more confidence in your ability to work with relational stuff. I remember thinking whether or not this translates into you doing work in this field, like whether or not you decide to work with relationships, I would just love the gift of what it would do for us. And I felt like it really did. It felt like it kind of started this process of us being able to engage in like more functional ways around collaboration and connection. And I don't know, when I think about like a maturing of the relationship.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so from your first training in relationship work, what kind of started happening with your work at that point? If I'm remembering right, we went to the first workshop, you and I, before we were married. And then when you started the deeper course and the relationship coaching training, I think we were married at that point. So I think we got married in between those two things. I think we were engaged when we went to the workshop and then married when you started your program, which would make sense because we got married in September and maybe you started in September or something like that.
We got married in May.
Oh, you're right. We got married in May and then you started your program in September. We got engaged in September.
Yeah, I have a general idea of the timeline, but I had started coaching clients after completing another coach training, and then I started deeper and the individual coach training. and then the couples coach training.
What was that like for you as you were starting to work with clients more one-on-one?
Well, at first it was very intense. I think my first session, I almost had a panic attack. I was just talking with someone over the phone and I didn't really know what I was doing. I didn't have any business help, so I don't know how someone found me. And I think I did 4 sessions with this guy, and I found myself just feeling tons of anxiety, worried that I wasn't going to be able to help him. I wanted to seem so professional, and I was surprised at how different it felt than when I was in the therapy programs, and I kind of knew what I was doing. I wasn't doing a lot of one-to-one, let me help you get from point A to point B. It was just more being around people, sometimes running groups and just seeing where they went. So I was really intimidated by the one-to-one 1 hour session format. And I think I did fine, but I probably just asked a lot of questions. And I mean, looking back, I'm like, yeah, I didn't really know what I was doing, but I was learning. That's what I was doing. I was probably just learning more than anything how to be with myself, because the more that I can stay relaxed and regulated, the more that I can access my intuition about what to ask, where what someone really wants, where they want to go. And of course, I've learned many tools over the years now. So yeah, that's my confidence has gone up a ton. I feel like I can handle just about anything. But initially, no, I was way overwhelmed.
So at first you're going through, you did another coach training prior to going through another just life coach training prior to going through the relationship coach training through the relationship school. So yeah, you did that. And then after, so this is all kind of new, really scary, even to the point of almost having a panic attack. And then what happened after that? What happened after kind of that first phase? Yeah, I'm kind of curious what was next.
When does the first phase end? What do you mean?
Well, I'm thinking about going to the deeper course, going to the relationship coach training, and yeah, I guess just I'd love to hear the continued progress of kind of what happened from there. What were the different trainings you continued to do? What was happening for you as you were going through that? How was your work changing? Just kind of curious to dive in a little more deeply to that.
Yeah, so doing that initial training was really helpful to have just a few tools and formats to use in the coaching process. And then going through deeper was helpful for learning about human psychology and attachment. The individual and couples training were separate trainings that I saw the difference between how you need to work with couples and how you work with individuals, because it's quite a bit different. In the midst of that, I also took a 1 year intervention training because I thought I might go on to do substance abuse interventions. And so, yeah, I learned more about family systems in that training. And then I did the circling training, which is more of a relational meditation training, how to speak to what's happening in the moment when you're with people. And I think it's just a better way to be able to hold space for people and what they're experiencing, and to be able to yeah, again, I think share my in the moment experience, the impact that people are having on me, which is something that I don't think many therapists learn how to do. It's just a
Yeah,
more relational way of being.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'd be curious to have you talk a little bit more about that experience because I felt like you going through that training really felt like it kind of kicked off some things in our relationship as far as you started to show up with some new skills in a way that I hadn't experienced you before that I felt like really helped us. And so I'm kind of curious to hear. And it's funny as I say that, I'm thinking about kind of the experience, how I experienced our relationship as you were going through these different trainings. And I think one thing that was really helpful for me as your partner when you went through the initial training with the relationship school was I realized at one point that often what happens after I share something with Bryce that feels vulnerable for me is I want to know what the impact of my share is on him. Because sometimes I would share something kind of vulnerable and sometimes he wouldn't respond at all. And I'd be like, did he hear me? Does he think I'm weird? And that's why he's like not responding. Like I couldn't figure out why I'd like share something so vulnerable. And Bryce would just kind of keep going as though nothing had been said sometimes. And so it was so helpful when we went to the workshop together and the tool of sharing impact. And so it gave me a language where I could say, hey, I just shared this thing. I'm feeling kind of vulnerable. I'm curious what the impact of my share was. And sometimes you're like, oh, I like didn't really feel anything. And I was like, oh, well, that's why he sometimes maybe didn't respond because it didn't like have much of an emotional impact. And he wasn't aware that it was vulnerable for me, or he wasn't flagging that I was needing more attention around it. So it was helpful when I could ask for impact and you knew how to give impact and share what was happening for you. It turned our conversations a little bit more relational. And then I noticed like a second shift that felt like it opened up some more relational capacity when you started that circling training. And it felt like, again, what was maybe on the inside started to come out on the outside a little bit more. Like you could give words to your inner experience in a way that I could see you and understand you more. And it felt like I then had space to do that as well. So it just kind of felt like it started to make what was happening inside each of us more available to the other, which felt like it was changing our capacity relationally. So I guess what I would love to hear about is a little bit more about that circling training and what that was like for you to start to go to those calls and to start having that experience of speaking what was on the inside on the outside in a more present based way. What was that like for you, or what were you learning, or what stands out about that experience?
Well, I think it comes down to where I'm focusing. Like in the coach trainings, I'm learning to focus on somebody else and get curious about them. And I think with reflective listening, again, I think that deepens my focus on the other person and what they're saying. And then the circling training was more about how to also focus on what's happening in me while I'm in that process with somebody else or you, which I just wasn't used to. I didn't quite understand the utility of it. If you're talking about in the past when I might not respond to things, like if you just said something and it wasn't a question, I might not say anything, or I might say, cool, if you told me a story. And the circling training helped me tap into and like know how to put language to what happened in me as you're sharing, or what's happening in the moment. So I noticed that I felt happy. I felt joy hearing that you had a good walk with your friend. Or I notice I feel a little sad that you feel anxious around so and so. So that I didn't really get that. It wasn't that I was intentionally missing it, but I think when I learned that you enjoy hearing what's going on with me, it just gave me another tool to use. And I can also see the value in that in general, because we live in a world where there's just a lot of content sharing. People are thinking about what they're going to say content wise to someone else. What'd you do last weekend? Oh, I went on vacation. Oh, I went on vacation too, somewhere like that. And it was fun and we did XYZ. And that's how a lot of conversations go. So I think highlighting where people just have a more narrow scope of what they're talking about versus like we're having this whole emotional experience all the time when we're with people, and we can become aware of what's happening in our bodies and in our emotional space and bring that into the conversation. If two people really know how to do it, it can create really interesting and connecting conversations. So anyways, I learned that.
Yeah, that's so amazing. And what did that start doing for you to learn that and be having those experiences yourself?
Well, it's still a bit of an uphill battle for me, because I think that you wear your emotions on your sleeve. They're much more accessible versus mine, for whatever reason, personality or conditioning or how I'm wired. They're harder to get to sometimes. They're just a little more faint. So it does take more work to get there, I think, internally for me. But it also is, I think it's just made life a little more colorful. I've used that analogy before, going from seeing only black and white to having more color come in, and sometimes being like, oh, wow, like I have a lot going on inside of me that I was not aware about just because I'm putting my attention there more. And oh, you have more, there's a lot more going on with you than I've ever realized. And I find myself getting curious about that in other people. And I think it helps me help people more because I can see how complex and deep so many people's histories are, and the whys to why they feel things or think things or behave the way they do. I just find myself in more open curiosity about that, which I think people feel when they're talking with me, especially in a coach setting where I want to know about you. Like I want to ask those questions that like maybe no one asks, like what was your childhood like? What was it like with your mom and your dad? And like what did you think when that was happening? And how did you cope with that? And I love being asked those questions. And, even being here with you, it feels safe and I feel interested. Time's kind of just flying by. And I think people feel really seen when there's someone that wants to know them, like really does. I also want to help, but like more than anything, I want to know you. And there's healing in that.
That feels really special. And as you talk about the idea of life becoming more colorful and seeing the color in you and the color in others, yeah,
Yeah.
that's very cool. And I'm kind of curious, how does that, as you're working with men, how does that integrate with your work with men?
Well, first, I sometimes have to do some work to educate men on the fact that there's a lot going on inside of them all the time because they don't see it. And sometimes that means just holding a little bit of space. Like, let's just kind of sit with this and see if anything comes up. And a lot of men have never done that before. So I think there's an educational component there. And then also, I see being a man in this world and having explored my history quite a bit, like I see how men are at a disadvantage when it comes to relationships. Like they were taught that they need to be tough and strong and stoic and have all the answers and be leaders. And that's a lot of pressure. It's a lot of pressure. And it also compresses any pain that they're feeling because if they don't feel like they can really bring it into their relationships or into the world, be seen in it, for people to have compassion for it, they start doing weird shit. I think they start being more secretive. I think they start using strategies to try to control other people. They sometimes have a need to always be right. And this is, I think, coming really from an insecurity. So the good thing is that I can see how insecure men really are. The problem is that because men are conditioned to not seek help, they are more resistant, I think, to coming in and getting help or seeing the value in the process. So normally it takes some painful experience like their wife saying, I want a divorce, or I don't feel safe with you, or maybe a big event happening in their life that kind of breaks them open and they're like, I can't function right now. I need help. So sometimes I'm catching men in really tough situations. Like that's when they're reaching out to me. And so we have to do some work to even get them back to stable. But also, men come in and they'll even continue the work even after they're stable and they have a good amount of self-awareness, which is really cool to see. But yeah, I just feel for men. It's just the system is not set up to help them. And I wish I had a big megaphone and that everyone could listen. I could say, hey, guys, you can get help. You actually need help. Everyone needs help with this. You didn't learn how to do it. You need to learn how to do it to have a more fulfilling life, to have a better relationship with your partner. And no one gets to skip out on this one. Like you really do have to do it, man. But I guess I'm doing that in some ways, like with my podcast. But I'm just surprised at how few men know anything about relationships and they're just winging it.
And how many of those people that you feel like don't know much about relationships and especially that emotional bonding component, how many of those men would you say are aware that they don't know what they don't know?
Well, that's the problem. I think ignorance is bliss, and it's a high majority. I think there was a study that I looked at recently that said that 10% of men have gone to therapy in the last 12 months. So 9 out of 10, and there could be, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how the study was set up, but that tracks with what I see, which is that the vast majority of men don't get any emotional help in any way for anything most of the time. So Yeah, it's a problem.
Yeah, I remember when you brought that, you came and shared that study with me, and you were like surprised at how low that number was.
I don't know if was I surprised?
It seemed like you were at the time, which was interesting because I remember thinking like that does not sound surprising, but I didn't know if maybe it was because you grew up in a home where you did have a dad who had gone to therapy and you yourself have been to therapy. And you both, like you've been in a world with a few men who do personal development. You've been in men's groups. But maybe you weren't surprised. Maybe I just interpreted that wrong.
Maybe I was excited that I just had some a data point that validated what I already thought, but no, I'm not surprised, and I'd be surprised if I was surprised about that.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Maybe that was it. You were just kind of like passionate about that data point, and
Yeah.
I bet that's what was happening. So as you are at the point where you are now, so you did the circling training. Then what happened after that? Where did you go with your career development, your personal development, relational development from there?
Yeah, well, now we're getting closer to where I am today. I did a couple of years of training with Terry Real, who's a well-known marriage and family therapist, and I learned a lot in that training about one up, one down dynamics, grandiosity and shame, which is, this graph that you and I like to use. If you have the anxious and avoidant on one axis, you have the grandiosity and shame on the other, and knowing where people fall on that graph when they're more activated or stressed, it has been super helpful. And even to see how you and I will polarize into one up, one down when there is conflict that comes up. And it also informs me on what direction I need to go for myself to get back to center or to help you get back to center. And then also working with couples, it's super helpful. It's more obvious to people when they learn about attachment styles that avoidants need to lean in more and anxious people need to lean back a lot of times and like let the avoidant come to them and just be really clear in their requests and boundaries. But it's less obvious when there's grandiosity in the mix and when there's shame, because people fighting to get back to center can look more aggressive. They can look like they're really hanging in there, but at their core, they're really feeling they are the problem, versus someone who's fighting from a more grandiose position is still blaming their partner for the problems, but the behaviors look pretty similar. So I don't know if that's going to make sense to anyone listening, but that's been really helpful in our relationship and then my work with couples. But I did that 2 year training. And then I don't know if it's even been a year since I stopped doing that training. It's maybe only been 6 months or so.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe 6 to 12 months, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm just reflecting on how powerful all these different experiences have, like they've been for your work. Like, your confidence in your work has grown so much. I've seen you just feel more confident in your work with relationship development with individuals and couples, and then how it's impacted us. And so, yeah, being able to see that one up, one down dynamic and understand polarity and power dynamics and sometimes the gender, the way that it even looks in terms of how it's gendered in our culture and all of that was just so helpful. I mean, it was cool when you went through all that training because I was able to watch the videos and learn also. So, I mean, it's been cool as you've been going through these trainings and I've been able to watch the videos and just learn a lot of the same things so that we have some shared language and shared reality around how to approach some of this work. But I really think you going through that was also really helpful. And I think it kind of came, I don't know how long ago it was that you and I had some conversations around blame, and you decided, like, I'm going to commit to a blame-free life or something like that.
It was a year.
A
It was
year.
2022. No blame.
That's right. Okay, that was 2022. That's awesome. So it was after that year then that you came upon, it was right around the end of that intentional year that you came upon Terry Real stuff and dove into that, which I think that really goes along with that kind of grandiosity, one up, one down. So, I can tell again, I feel so glad that you've done all of these different trainings. I think they brought so much to you, and then they've also brought a lot to our relationship. So, yeah, so thanks for just stepping in and doing so much work and
Yeah.
learning so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. I mean, up until again 6 to 12 months ago, I've been in trainings for 8 years, really nonstop, and sometimes even overlapping training. So really trying to put in the work and learn. And I wanted everyone to know listening that I actually didn't complete my goal of no blame in 2022. 100%. It improved significantly, but I think shooting for the stars can be a good idea, and I'm still on that journey. So it's not like I don't blame Jenny or other people for my feelings, but
Mhm.
a lot more awareness around them. So it's harder to stay there, like once you know that like if I'm stuck in this victim place or place of all blame, like once you know that it can't be all everybody else or the world, then yeah, it can be hard to just to stay there, which yeah, I mean it's more empowering, but it is a lot more confronting too.
Mhm.
Sometimes when I hear people just going on and on about blaming politics or the world or those people, and I'm like, man, you're stuck there, right? Like, and that's fine, but it's annoying. It gets annoying to hear. So, I wish more people would learn about how to take responsibility and change their own internal state and get more empowered in their own lives.
I love that. Yeah, I recently saw like a little meme that said something about like you can't create world peace if you don't even know how to create peace inside yourself and something like that, which kind of reminds me of what you're saying. And I'm also thinking a little bit again about that one up, one down, because there was something else you said that I thought was really important. And like you said, people might not know exactly what we're talking about, but it might be getting in, just what you're hearing might be making some sense. But this idea that someone who's in a one down, collapsed shame position can be holding on and look on the outside as though they're okay or they're doing like they're strong enough, but on the inside be pretty collapsed at their core. And how a person in a one up position can be looking like more calm or humble than they actually feel at their core. And so I don't know, it's, for some reason that just struck me as like, I suddenly was thinking about how that's true that we don't always look on the outside, like what's going on the inside.
Mhm.
And I think that's one thing, again, as I've worked with you in couples work, it's been really nice to have a male perspective and a female perspective for me because sometimes Bryce can see things I can't and vice versa. And it's sometimes hard to tell what's really going on for someone just based on the external information. Sometimes it takes like being able to catch some of those more subtle things. So I was just thinking about that. And I was also thinking about how earlier when you were talking about your compassion towards men, that's been another thing that I think has really impacted me in our work is you can sometimes bring in a compassion for men that I sometimes I can't always see or experience. Like I'll see you experience and I'll be like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad Bryce is experiencing compassion for this person because I'm having a hard time doing that in this moment because I'm just feeling frustrated or angry that he's acting one up and grandiose and his partner here is collapsed and in shame and I like want him to come down and really connect more to his heart and to her and but you have this ability to hold compassion for men and hold compassion for that mutedness of their emotions that they sometimes can't access. And so that's just kind of what's popping up in the background as you're talking about all that for me.
Yeah. Men can be hard to love, and because it can be hard for men to love in and compassion in. And when I look at men, sometimes I see little insecure boys in big bodies that are trying to meet some need. And sometimes it does work to speak to that part of them and just wonder about how they got that way and just go around the ego and the defensiveness and the mask. And yeah, I'm glad I know how to do that art. It doesn't always work, but men are hard to love sometimes. They can be quite resistant to it.
Hmm. Yeah. Okay, so now we're getting to the final portion of this interview, and this is a different day. So if you're watching the video, Bryce and I are in different clothes, and I'm excited to come to the present day now with you, Bryce, and ask some final questions.
Okay, let's do it.
So you finished up with the Terry Real training about 6 to 12 months ago, and now you are still offering coaching, you're still running men's groups, you're still doing retreats. You and I work with couples together. We both have individual clients. I'm kind of curious to ask how all of your work that you're doing right now currently affects how you experience your relationships. And I'm curious about first, I want to talk about in what ways is it hard? So, how does doing the work you do, knowing the skills you know, in what ways is that actually contribute to things that might be difficult in your life, whether it's in your relationship with me, in your relationship with friends or neighbors, with family? Like, in what ways does your work and knowing what you know make relationships difficult?
Well, I think there's this idea that ignorance is bliss. And I see some people in the world that maybe don't know much about relationships can put up with quite a bit. They have a high tolerance for people being passive aggressive, sarcastic, maybe even mean sometimes. And they're able to compartmentalize it and just kind of move on. Maybe they're just less aware of what's actually happening in their internal world. And I don't have that luxury anymore. I think the goal is to grow my capacity to be with discomfort and negative feelings, but I think I just notice little things a lot more. And there's probably some analysis going on in the background at all times. When someone shares something that they're going through, like I instantly want to deepen my understanding and their understanding of it. And sometimes people don't really want to do that. They're just kind of in story, wanting to share story. So I think in that way, it can sometimes feel lonely. And yeah, I just don't know that many people have a framework or have a desire to really have deeper, more connected relationships in the way that I want to. Based on what I've learned about creating, yeah, secure and honest relationships that can handle some conflict and work through it effectively and skillfully.
Thanks for sharing that. What about in your relationship with me? Is there any way in which your work makes things harder, your marriage relationship?
Well, because we're business partners, we have to wear two different hats at times. And I think we're still working out how to differentiate there, like what's just us as a couple doing life and what's us as business partners. So that's been a huge challenge that's kicked my ass in a lot of ways. Because I think I've learned how to show up well and I feel confident relationally, just being a partner. But as a business partner, I feel less confident and less competent. And so it brings up more insecurities with me, and we get into more conflicts around business stuff. And it's hard to, it's not as easy as taking off one hat and putting on another. Sometimes I feel like I'm wearing both at the same time, or I don't know which one I'm wearing. So it takes a lot more intention. Let's see. I think it can also be confronting to be working with people on things that I have struggled with or currently struggle with on some level. I've talked about this idea that I'm continually being offered a mirror into my own stuff. Like I am not perfect. So when someone comes in and they're like, yeah, I'm feeling, frustrated with my partner about XYZ, I'm having trouble making space for it. There can be times when I'm like, oh, do I feel hypocritical because I also struggle with being impatient or judgmental. So there are times when I'm trying to help people with something that I'm also trying to work out for myself. And the benefits of that are that I do think I get to grow more rapidly because of that, because of the mirrors there quite a bit. But yeah, that it also poses the challenge that as humans, I think we struggle with a lot of the same things. And so I'm just seeing that all the time in people, and it brings up stuff in me.
Thanks for sharing all of that. I appreciate that. And then what would you say are, I know with that last one, you wrapped in one of the benefits to having that accountability continually
Yeah.
with you through that mirror of clients. What else would you say are the pros or what you experience as the pros? In what other ways would you say your work impacts your current relationships in positive ways?
I think it really helps me be more mindful about the interactions that I have with you and that I have with other people. I do see my work is long form meditation every session. And I will even tell clients this, like, hey, we might not solve all of your problems today or come up with a specific solution, but what we're trying to do is grow our capacity to be with what's here and have more compassion for what's here, while also holding that you want it to be different. You want to figure it out. And so I find myself, using tools in sessions and then having a residual effect of that. Like when I come out of a session, I often feel more present, more regulated, more more in tune with myself because I'm having to do that. The way I like to do coaching is to really tap into that during a session. So I haven't been doing as much formal meditation lately, and I feel like I get a lot of that through my work. And it's hard to see how I could do that in a lot of other different jobs that I've had, where it's more about doing, it's more fast paced, it's not relational. So yeah, I think it really just benefits my well-being, my emotional well-being in a lot of ways.
I love that. So you're talking there about how it impacts you just in relationship with yourself, practice of presence on a consistent basis in those relational containers with clients.
Yeah, and I think patience is a big one and kindness. That's something that people are going to feel that when they're working with me. Like if I'm feeling frustrated with them, they're going to feel that. And I think people, even if they don't say it, are going to start to shut down or feel pressure. And so having that intention going into sessions, I think translates also into our relationship because yeah, there's lots of ways in which like I don't always get to do whatever I want all the time without any impact on you. And you have your own feelings and life experience that you're always bringing in. And so being able to have just make more space for this dance that we're doing in our life, yeah, I think it helps a lot. I know I think that I've become like, I don't know, 80% more patient relationally than I was when we first met. I mean, and that kind of hit me hard after moving in with you and going through some bigger challenges. I'm like, man, like sometimes I just want to change things immediately or like make you be different immediately. And that just didn't work. And so knowing how to slow down and step back and be like, okay, I can see why you're looking at it this way, even if it's different than me. And yeah, this might not change overnight, but like, can we still be connected in the process? I mean, I think that's what helps our relationship feel better for me is when I can do that. And it helps that you're not doing anything that's like a major concern, right? Like we're talking about, when and if to maybe go on a vacation or spend some money. It's not like you have a drinking problem and I'm like, I'm just trying to make space for it. No, I think you take good care of yourself. And so when it boils down to the actual content of the issue, I think we both live healthy lives. And so it is more about just making space for some of the discomfort and the tension that's there.
Mhm. Yeah, it's interesting as you're saying that. Well, I just love it as you're saying it. I'm like, I'm so grateful because when you said I think I'm 80% more patient than I was at the beginning of our relationship, I was like, I would actually say that's true. Like I have noticed a considerable softening and opening and compassion and yeah, and whether it's a mix of skill or a mix of just your way of being has continued to change over your work with people and your training and learning skills. It's been really, really, really nice to have a partner who does this work and who practices what he teaches and really does bring it into our relationship. Like I really see you working the skills and bringing that stuff into our relationship. And I also will notice, if we're in kind of a struggle about something or we have some tension with us, it does seem like if one or both of us go into sessions, it seems like when we reconnect, it does seem like our work with clients helps us kind of get regrounded in ourselves and come back together with more softness and compassion and openness.
Totally. Yeah, I think most of my suffering is when I'm really self-focused, right? I'm thinking about what's this mean for me? Like I'm not getting a good deal out of this or whatever it is in small and big ways. And then when I'm holding space for someone else, I'm hearing about their issues, sometimes being like, well, I'm glad that I don't have that going on. Or it's just like it gets me out of my own self-focus in a way by holding space for others. So yeah, I've noticed that framing, that reframing of things helps. Like when I'm in this narrow view of just what I think, what I feel, it's all identity based. When I can broaden my view to the world, my whole history of my life and how far I've come. Yeah, everything just it softens it. It just widens my gaze more. It's kind of just like meditation in a way where there's so much to take in any moment, and there can be a lot of magic in that being able to do that.
Mhm. Oh, thanks for sharing that. I was just reflecting too there on how my observation of you, since I live with you, I get to observe you more closely. And I do see you do such a nice job of integrating that. And, I'm just imagining how there are certain situations where people maybe have a parent or a partner who helps a lot of people, but then comes home and is grumpy or kind of compartmentalizes their abilities or their skills in certain ways. And not that that could never happen with you or with I. And I see the way you work and the process through which you work, your practice of your sessions being a way not only to connect and see your client more, but that you have to regulate yourself to do that. And I think you just do a nice job of then integrating what you're doing in your sessions out into the rest of your world. Like, I don't see you compartmentalize it and have like blinders on. So I'm just acknowledging how grateful I am that you do the work you do, that you do it the way you do it, and that you integrate it into the rest of your life.
Well, you've heard me say this often that I think the test of how well I can utilize relationship skills depends a lot on how you feel, right? Like I hope that if someone asks you how does Bryce show up in the home and when he's not in sessions, that you might be able to highlight some things that I struggle with, but that you're like, no, he does a lot of things really well and he's progressed and he's still working on growing as a partner. So, and I think the fact that we do a lot of our work together with couples or we lead retreats together, like people are going to feel that. So I think we really have to be on and honest with ourselves so that we can do that. And so I think there's a good reason why people don't often do this together because I think it can be hard to be with each other in the presence of others if we have so much struggle outside of sessions. I think there's a high level of accountability that I put on myself in order to show up in that way with couples. Whereas, yeah, you're right. If I was just doing this work, maybe it wouldn't really matter how things were going with me because I could still just kind of like go into this other space. But yeah, I think I'm like fine tuned for hypocrisy and I don't want to be a hypocrite. So yeah, I think that it's motivating.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. That's awesome. And your YouTube handle is, or your YouTube name is The Professional Husband, is that right?
Yeah, at professional husband.
At Professional Husband. So if anyone's interested in finding Bryce's videos on YouTube, I'll put the links all below as well. But when I saw that recently, that that was your handle, and I think I had known, but I'd forgotten. And I was just like, I love that that's your name because you put so much intention into being a quote professional husband. You really do. Like you said, you see your ability to show up well in our relationship as a huge indicator of your ability to help other people create great relationships and help other men become really good partners.
Yeah, it came through a few years ago as a joke more. I'm like, oh, that's funny. No one would ever say that. That's not like a profession. But then I think thinking about it and being like, well, I look at this as a career, as a life path. And this is something I'm teaching people to do, how to be a lot of times better husbands. And then the fact that I do just take it really seriously, and then it's also my job, it actually makes a lot of sense, even though I've never heard someone call themselves a professional husband. It makes sense. So I should probably uh, maybe I should use that a little bit more, like when people ask me what I do for work or something.
I love it because
Good branding.
yeah, it's good. It's good branding. It's funny, and it really does also seem true in terms of how much energy and time and intention you put there.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
cool. I love it. Okay, so there was one other question I was going to ask. Oh, I was curious about, you talked about one of the disadvantages. I shouldn't even say disadvantages, but some of the challenges that come up doing the work you're doing when you're trying to relate with friends and neighbors in the community. And you talked about sometimes the loneliness you can feel or the longing to go deeper and not everyone wanting that. What would you say are some of the pros to doing this work and in terms of your effects with friends and neighbors and acquaintances? Because I know you and I have, a deeper connection and we're working on this day to day. But yeah, with people just around you in your life. In what ways does the work you do impact your experience in a positive way?
Well, hopefully people feel really safe with me to open up. I have built some good connections in the neighborhood with people. And I think the fact that I want to ask deeper questions when I'm with people and really get to know people, not just talk about the surface stuff. Yeah, I hope that I put forward a vibe of like someone who's relatable, curious about people, safe to open up to. And it'll happen in little moments sometimes with friends when they hear about what I do, and I'll ask them some questions and people just open up. And then I also feel pretty comfortable sharing just where I'm at with people more honestly so they get to know me. I think you and I as a couple, and we're still working on it, but we have created some really cool community focused events like our yearly camping trip up to Colab Reservoir where the neighbors come up. And people love that. And I think some of the get togethers we've done where we've done authentic relating exercises with neighbors and you've done some with the women. So I think we're sometimes giving people an experience that they don't get anywhere else, maybe have never had in their life. So I think people kind of know us for that. And so, yeah, to answer your question, I think those are the pros that I think we have the ability to vet who we really want to connect with. And there's a lot of really nice people in our neighborhood. And then also build connections pretty quickly with people so that we can get to know them more than just the surface level of who they are.
I love that. And then as far as other relationships, I sometimes like to think about we have relationships with ourselves, we have relationships with people, and then we also have how we relate to things like our money or our health. Is there anything else you want to say about how your work impacts your relationships to money or to health or anything else in particular presently in positive or negative ways?
Let's see. Well, as you know, money has been a challenging one for me, and I think it's because I haven't really ever been attached to it. I just kind of want to do work that I love, and I want to be able to be free in the world, and I don't need super nice things, but there's a reality to living in this world where if, we have a mortgage and we have home repairs and we have vehicles and insurance and all these things to where like I know I need to make money and know how to move it around. And yeah, that can be a challenge. Like I wish that I could just do my work and not even think about that. But it is something that can stress me out, especially when we're wanting to grow and do more things. And we're in a profession where, sometimes it can be people can judge people that are in this space and make a lot of money because it's more service oriented. It's more like spiritually focused work. So trying to find that balance has been challenging, and I don't really like to put myself out there that much. I don't do a ton of social media other than my Facebook posts that I write. But I'm not out hiring photographers and doing photo shoots and taking really good pictures and uploading them to Instagram or whatever and using all the hashtags. I don't know how to do a lot of that stuff. And so trying to learn how to market and brand myself, I can get frustrated by that. And yeah, so I don't know. To answer your question, it's a mix. Like I'm so glad that I found a career that I might do for the rest of my life and to where I can make a living at it. And the challenge of really growing a business that has all these numbers involved and might require me to go outside of my comfort zone to put myself out there and sell myself at times. I don't totally know how to do that. And sometimes I don't know if I want to do that. And so I go back and forth between just giving up on it and being like, we'll just kind of let the universe bring people to us as, however it's going to happen, which kind of works. But also I'm like, yeah, this might not get me to where I want to be long term. So yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. Anything else in terms of your relationship with your health?
Let's see, my health. Well, I'm in really good health. I've always been an athlete. I've been in competitive sports since I was 6 years old, football and wrestling, MMA for a period of time. Now it's pickleball. I still play basketball once or twice a week. So I think I take really good care of myself because I want to be so active. And it's not hard to get me to exercise if it's in the form of a game. So as you know, I probably do some type of movement 6 days a week. And a lot of times it's pretty intense physical exercise. So I don't know how my work impacts that or not, but I think taking good care of myself, having a fairly good diet helps me have the energy and the focus to be able to be with people. And I know that can be a challenge for some people.
Yeah, thanks for
Yeah,
sharing.
and my mental health. Like I think sometimes I think I'm stressed, but then I see other people's situations, and I'm like, I actually don't think I'm that stressed. And that I think that allows me to again have like focus and energy because I think I might have low grade stress that's there quite a bit, but I don't think it peaks or spikes very much because we've set our life up in a way to where it's pretty chill.
Mhm. Thank you for sharing all of that. It feels fun and interesting. It was very interesting to me to ask the questions and hear what was going to come up. And so, yeah, thanks for sharing how your work currently impacts some of these relationships. And I think that's all the questions I have. Anything else you want to mention about anything coming up or just anything you want to mention for people who might be interested in working with you?
No, I think I already shared what I do, and I'm imagining you're going to put some links in the description if they want to look at our websites, see what we offer, and if they want to work with us. We are here. We have some availability. I think we have a lot of really cool options, whether it's like a lower cost group offering with online resources or like a more intimate group setting with the men's group. A lot of guys love that. And then we have in-person retreats, and then the couples work that we do together, or we work with individuals on our own. So I think we have all kinds of options for people in different situations. So yeah, just check that out.
Cool. Yeah, I'll put all those links below. And also, we did run a coach training. So if you're interested in getting into this work yourself and you want to learn how to help support other people, we don't currently have a cohort going, but we do offer it as like a self-paced program and training. So for anyone that's listening, if you're like, I'm curious to get trained myself, or I'm already a coach or a therapist, but I want to learn the model that Jen and Bryce use, then I'll include the links to all of that below. All right. Thanks, Bryce.
Yeah, you're welcome.
It was so fun to be with you, and I'm just really grateful to be married to a professional husband. Yeah.
Thanks for the interview, Jen. This is really, really fun for me.
Cool. You're really welcome. Okay, thanks everyone. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.